When the summer anime season started to air, I, like most people, went to check out the new seasonal anime airing, such as The God of High School and Rental Girlfriend, when I stumbled upon an anime called Monster Girl Doctor. From its Japanese title of Monster Musume no Oushan, I immediately thought it'd be an ecchi comedy anime about monster girls, in the same vein as Monster Musume no Iru Nijio, but with a monster patient dynamic added to it. Looking up on Mao, its tags nearly match those of Monster Musume, with two exceptions that I'll talk about later. It even has a Lamia girl as his assistant in the main artwork for the series, and furthermore, in the show, she is the first real female character he actually meets. So, I sat down and watched the first episode, then the second episode, the third episode, and finally the fourth episode. Then I came to this conclusion. Monster Girl Doctor is Monster Musume if it had all the fun and enjoyment sucked out of it. Before I come to the reasoning behind my conclusion, let us first understand the premise of Monster Girl Doctor. Monster Girl Doctor is about a human who treats various different monster girls and their ailments. That usually involves touching the monster girl in a weird place, such as in her gills, or reattaching the leg of a flesh golem. His assistant is a Lamia called Sapphonite, who helps him by subduing the patients and by effectively filling the role a nurse usually does. They live in a town called Linsworm, which is a place where humans and monsters live side by side and operate out of a clinic, having just qualified as doctors by Professor Cthulhu, who is basically Cthulhu in female humanoid form. Every week they encounter a new Monster of the Week, who has a particular problem which usually involves the other monster girls in some capacity. Now, from that premise it sounds like it could be a fun show. However, the show itself is undermined by several significant problems. Chief amongst them is its age rating, as it is rated PG-13 or teen. What this means is that unlike Monster Musume, Monster Girl Doctor cannot show any nipples or incredibly lewd or risque content. For a lot of people, this is an immediate deal breaker, as what is the point of an ecchi show if they cannot show nipples or have any incredibly suggestive sexual scenes? They would never, for example, do the skin shedding scene for Monster Musume or his hand slips. So, what you get left with is some small scenes involving the monster girls blushing and moaning a bit, which, given this is rated teen, seems kind of pointless, as in why bother having those scenes when you could literally just cut them out and just run a straight-laced show about a doctor helping monster girls in the same vein as Michiru Neko. Though, this would technically ruin the light novel that they are trying to adapt, although you can argue that simply by cutting a lot of the ecchi out, they might have already ruined it. I don't know, I haven't read the light novel yet. Another problem is the protagonist, Glenn. It actually feels as if they have taken the main character from a generic isekai and then transmuted them into the body of a monster doctor. Hell, if you told me this was an isekai about a vet, who is then reincarnated into a world where monster girls exist, I would have completely believed you. Glenn himself has zero personality beyond, I'm a doctor, let me help you. He has no other skills apart from being a doctor, as he is never shown to cook or be interested in anything apart from his career. And, as with all light novel protagonists, he cannot be shown to want to have sexual relationships with any character, despite their advances. To top it all off, when Kimito from Monster Musume, a character literally designed to have no personality, as to allow the viewer to replace the character with themselves, has more personality and depth than the main lead of your show, then you have a problem. Monster Girl Doctor's setting is meant to be a world where there was recently a war between humanity and the monsters, and how everything is peaceful, etc. Yet, we don't really see any common animosity between humans and monsters. I mean, it took 4 episodes before we get any human angst against monsters, and that's literally one guy from a mercenary company. And you can argue it is literally counteracted by another member of the same gang, who asked for the centaurs to leave them alone because they were both mercenaries, meaning that it is money which drove the gang to do what they did, rather than the hatred to monsters. Compare that to Monster Musume, where, in the first episode, you have a group of people talking badly about monsters, and Kimito punching them to reflect the distrust between monsters and humans existing at that point in time. You'd expect the same animosity between monsters from having a human doctor that is specialised in them, yet they don't portray there being any at all, apart from the usual, I don't like going to see the doctor. I mean, the war literally ended a decade ago according to the show, and apart from some mercenaries, you don't really get the feeling there was even a war to begin with. It could literally be any other fantasy show. To top this all off, all of the fun and enjoyable moments in Monster Musume was a combination of slapstick, misunderstandings and ecchi, As I have previously mentioned, they have removed any strong notions of the etchiness from the show. Simply to compare the bondage that Archangel uses on Liv compared with the bondage the Doctor uses in episode 5, there is no comparison. Now, if we focus on the slapstick element, what made Monster Musume enjoyable was to watch the physical humour scenes, like when Kimiko gets attacked by a jealous Mia and the rest of the Monster Girls due to them not knowing their own strength, or him accidentally touching them. We all know that Kimiko was in no real danger, as they made the moments themselves very light-hearted, as if to tell the audience, hey, Kimito's not in any real danger, don't worry about it, he'll be absolutely fine. Monster Girl Doctor, on the other hand, purges all this slapstick and physical comedy, with the tone set and very serious all the time apart from 1 or 2 scenes, meaning that they cannot do the comedy elements that made Monster Musume enjoyable to watch. The serious tone meaning that if any character suffered any real harm, it would linger for a while and should be taken seriously. This, for me, ruins the show, as you do not want a comedy to take itself too seriously if it is to be enjoyable. You want it to be somewhat self-aware that it is a comedy show and that it can do silly and ludicrous things. Finally, we need to talk about the Monster Girls. In Monster Musume, the girls are all introduced quite quickly, with each of them having their own segment where they come into play before immediately joining the harem. They also have interactions and disagreements with each other, which made the show more entertaining to watch, such as the big fight that Centaura, Pappy and Mia have in episode 3. Monster Girl Doctor does not have a harem tag, and although the secondary characters do reappear, they do not interact as much amongst themselves, apart from talking about the main character. This prevents many of the interactions that made Monster Musume as enjoyable, such as watching a slime playing Wii Sports for Harpy, as that made the girls come across more 3D than they otherwise would have, as it helps flesh out their personalities, as they have other traits aside from interacting with the main character. Whereas, in Monster Girl Doctor, the fact that there is no real social interaction between the girls, which makes them come off more as one-dimensional characters, who are literally just pieces designed to move the plot forward. There is never any moment where the girls are interacting with each other to have fun. It is always plot-driven. The girl we spend the most time with is Saphonette the Lamia, and even then it feels like they drew her character background out of a hat. She is a nurse, who's also a trained assassin, who's also the main character's childhood friend, whose family were also apothecaries, who's also in love with him. It comes across as she is the only monster girl you are meant to root for all the rest being filler or side characters. Ironically enough, the entire point of a Monster Girl show is to show off all the different types of monster girls, and by forcing Saphonette as the only real waifu choice, it kind of destroys this idea completely. The only real competition that she has that comes close is a girl called Tiziat Sifia, whose name I've just butchered, and even then you get the sense that there is no real chance of her winning, with her becoming similar to Rebecca from Black Clover, as in you like her, but you just know she's never going to win the waifu wars in the end. Compare that with Monster Musume's vast array of different waifus to choose from, and you end up with only one that really matters, and if you don't really like her, then you're pretty much screwed in the waifu department. Overall, Monster Girl Doctor comes across as the poor man's Monster Musume, as it lacks the character dynamics and comedy to be entertaining, and the etchiness to make it an erotic anime, leaving it as a broken husk of a show that will ultimately be forgotten as soon as the season ends, rather than being talked about and enjoyed like Monster Musume, which still has a big following to this day.